Betrayal doesn't always arrive with slammed doors or shouted words. Sometimes it comes dressed in holiday lights and the quiet scrape of a chair you're no longer allowed to sit in. The house smelled like pine and roasted turkey, like Christmas always had. Laughter spilled from the dining room, muffled by the closed door. I stood in the doorway, hand resting on the frame, waiting for Daniel to meet my eye. He didn't. Vanessa's voice cut sharp through the hum. "There's no space at the table. We've got the cousins, the kids, the extra chairs already full." I blinked at her, then glanced toward the long table, crowded but not overflowing. There was a chair at the end, Ellen's old seat. Empty. "That's fine," I said slowly, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "I'll take a spot at the end." Vanessa shook her head, smiling that tight smile that meant she'd already decided. "The garage is set up. We put a little table out there. It'll be quieter for you." Quieter, the word cut deeper than she knew. Daniel cleared his throat. "Dad, maybe it's easier this way. Less crowded." "Less crowded," my voice scraped low. "It's Christmas, Daniel, and you want me in the garage." He looked down at his plate, avoiding me entirely. Vanessa's hand rested on his arm like punctuation. The garage was cold, the cement floor unforgiving beneath my chair. Dust clung to the corners, boxes stacked high with holiday decorations Ellen once labeled in her careful handwriting. A single bulb swung overhead, humming faintly. They'd put out a folding table and a plastic chair, like I was some drifter they'd taken in for the night. A plate sat waiting, the turkey already lukewarm, congealed gravy dulling under the light. I sat staring at the food. My hands didn't move. The door creaked. Little footsteps padded across the cement. My grandson, Ben, no more than 7, held a plate piled high with rolls. His eyes darted toward the house. "Grandpa," he whispered, "Mom said you take up too much space at the big table." The words landed heavier than the turkey. I forced a smile, my throat tight. "Thank you, Ben, you saved me." He set the plate down and hugged my arm. "I like sitting with you." Before I could answer, Vanessa's voice snapped from the doorway. "Ben, back inside now." He scurried off, the door slamming shut behind him. The laughter from the dining room swelled again, sealing me off like I was never part of it. Inner thought. 40 years in this house. I built the shelves in that garage with my own hands, stored every memory box Ellen kept. And here I was, eating turkey in the cold because my daughter-in-law decided I was clutter. I picked up the fork, forced a bite. The meat was dry, the silence louder than the storm outside. I looked at the boxes stacked against the wall. One caught my eye, WILLS and House PAPERS. Ellen's careful script. She never trusted digital files. She always said, "Paper doesn't lie, Sam, people do." I stared at that box, my chest tightening. Vanessa thought she'd won by sending me to the garage. She didn't realize she'd just seated me next to the ammunition Ellen left behind. I set the fork down, pushing the plate away. My breath fogged in the cold air. "If someone's listening," I muttered to myself, "don't ever let silence swallow your story. Don't let them erase you like this." The bulb above me flickered, swinging slightly, casting shadows over Ellen's handwriting on the boxes. That night, as the laughter inside turned to clinking glasses and toasts I wasn't part of, I made a quiet vow. I'd stay silent for now, but a crack had formed, and cracks have a way of widening until the whole house falls in. Final beat. They thought banishing me to the garage was the end of my story, but Ellen left me reminders in every drawer, every file, every piece of paper, and soon those reminders would speak louder than their laughter ever could. Some wounds don't bleed, they freeze, leaving you staring through glass at a life that no longer counts you in. The morning sun broke through the frost on the window panes, glinting against the Christmas decorations still dangling half-heartedly from the porch. I walked into the living room, still stiff from the garage's chill. Vanessa was already orchestrating her next performance. Everyone together, she chirped, arranging people like chess pieces. Daniel, bring Ben to the front. Aunt Marcy over here. Let's make this perfect. I moved forward instinctively. For years, I'd been in every Christmas photo beside Ellen, with Daniel tucked between us, smiles that sometimes hid the arguments but still meant family. I was halfway across the rug when Vanessa's hand shot out, palm up, stopping me cold. "Not this time," she said softly, though her voice carried the steel of command. "It's just immediate family." My stomach knotted. Immediate family, Daniel is my son. Her smile tightened. "Yes, but this is for our branch, our Christmas card, you understand." I looked at Daniel, hopping for rescue, for a flicker of protest. But he only shifted his weight, eyes fixed on the carpet, his jaw tight with silence. The air felt thin. I stepped back. My legs carried me, though my heart wanted to collapse right there on the rug. Vanessa turned, clapping her hands. "Okay," big smiles. I watched from the hallway as they posed by the tree. Daniel, arm around Vanessa. My grandson, Ben, perched on a stool. Aunt Marcy fussing with her scarf. The camera clicked, sealing me out of the frame. Through the reflection in the window, I saw it. An empty chair in the background where I should have been. My chair. The click echoed like a gunshot. I retreated quietly, the laughter swelling behind me. My hands shook as I pulled open the garage door again, slipping back into the cold. The boxes stacked along the wall loomed larger now, their labels like whispers from Ellen. House papers, insurance, will. I knelt, tugging one box closer. Dust puffed up, stinging my eyes. Inside were file folders wrapped in rubber bands, manila envelopes stacked with precision only Ellen could manage. One caught my attention, property final, her handwriting steady, slanted. I opened it carefully. Inside lay photocopies, the deed to the house, notarized wills, letters from our attorney. Ellen had kept duplicates of everything. She must have known one day someone would try to test us. Her voice returned, clear as if she were beside me. "Sam, you can't trust smiles. Trust paper. Paper tells the truth when people won't." My pulse quickened. I flipped through, reading the notes she'd scribbled in the margins. Phrases underlined. Joint tenancy, co-owner rights. No transfer without consent. My hands trembled. Vanessa wasn't just being cruel. She was being deliberate, keeping me out of photos, pushing me into the garage, rewriting me as the unwanted guest. She was building a new story, one without me in it. And Daniel, he was letting her. The garage light flickered above me, casting long shadows over Ellen's handwriting. My throat tightened as I whispered to the empty air, "You planned for this, didn't you, Ellen? You knew someday someone would try to erase me." The papers rustled in my hands like confirmation. The door creaked again. I shoved the folder halfway back in the box as Ben slipped inside. His cheeks were pink from the cold. "Grandpa," he whispered, "Mom says you weren't feeling good. That's why you didn't take the picture." I forced a thin smile. "Is that what she told you?" He nodded, confused. "But I saw you there, you looked fine." I reached out, ruffled his hair. "Sometimes people change the story. Ben doesn't mean the truth disappears." He tilted his head, "Like when you write something in pen." I smiled faintly, "Exactly like that." He grinned and ran back inside before Vanessa could notice. I sat there alone again, holding Ellen's papers close. My pulse steadied with each breath. They wanted me erased, but Ellen's notes were ink on paper, unchangeable, undeniable. I placed the folder carefully back in the box, slid it under the workbench, and whispered a promise to myself. They can cut me out of photos, banish me to the garage, call me dead weight, but they can't erase what Ellen wrote. And before this is over, they'll learn the hard way. The bulb hummed above, steady this time, as if agreeing. When trust is stolen, it doesn't scream. It vanishes quietly, leaving behind an empty box where your life once lived. The bank smelled the same as it always had, like polished wood and old carpet. I'd walked through those glass doors for decades, depositing paychecks, signing loan forms, storing away the papers that built a life. Today, my hands shook against the counter. "I need to access my safe deposit box," I told the clerk, sliding my ID across. She smiled politely. "Of course, Mr. Anderson, one moment." I followed her into the back, down the narrow hallway lined with metal doors. She unlocked mine, handed me the thin key, and waited as I slid it open. The box was lighter than I remembered, too light. Inside, the envelope was gone. The one Ellen and I had placed there together 20 years ago, the deed to the house. My heart dropped into my stomach. There should be papers here, the house deed. My wife and I left it. The clerk hesitated, checking her computer. "Our records show the box was accessed earlier this year." I froze. "By who?" She scrolled, lips tightening. "By Daniel Anderson, using power of attorney." The air left my lungs. I gripped the cold metal edge of the box. "Power of attorney," my voice cracked. "I never gave Daniel power of attorney." She glanced at me nervously. "It says here the paperwork was filed 6 months ago." My palms went cold. 6 months ago, Daniel had helped me after my hip surgery. I trusted him to handle small errands, picking up groceries, paying bills while I was laid up. Did he slip papers in front of me then? I shook my head. "No, I never signed that." The clerk bit her lip. "Would you like to request copies of the documents on file?" "Yes," I whispered. My voice barely reached my own ears. "Yes, please." Back in Harold's truck, the city lights blurred through the windshield. He drove in silence, but his eyes kept cutting toward me. "Well," he asked finally. "The deed's gone." My throat burned as I said it. "Daniel took it, claimed power of attorney." Harold gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. "Did you sign anything?" "No," I stared at the rain-streaked glass. "Not knowingly, not ever." He muttered a curse under his breath. "Sounds like she's behind this. Vanessa's the kind who'd twist his arm. Daniel doesn't have the spine for it." I swallowed hard. "Ellen warned me, Harold, before her surgery," she said. "Don't let anyone sign for you, not even family." I thought she was being cautious. I thought Daniel would never. The words collapsed in my chest. Harold's voice softened. "Sam, listen. You're not crazy, you're not weak. They played you dirty, but we'll get it back. You still have copies, right?" I nodded faintly. "Ellen made them. She always planned ahead." "Then that's your weapon," Harold said firmly. "Paper doesn't lie." That night I sat alone at his kitchen table. The copy of Ellen's handwriting stared up at me from the folder, her note in the margin. Co-owners only. No transfer without both signatures. I pressed my forehead against my hand, the paper trembling beneath my palm. My chest ached with betrayal. How long had Daniel planned this? Did he look at me across the dinner table knowing he'd stolen the deed? Did Vanessa smirk at me in the garage because she already thought the house was hers? The thought hollowed me out. Inner monologue. I raised a boy who once clutched my hand crossing the street, who looked up at me like I could fix anything. Now he was stealing from me with forged signatures, hiding behind his wife's ambition. The silence in that kitchen felt like judgment. My breath echoed against it. I poured a glass of water, staring out at the night. The reflection in the window wasn't mine, it was Ellen's voice in my memory. "Don't let anyone sign for you, not even family." I gripped the counter, whispering to her ghost. "You were right, Ellen, they're trying to erase me, but you left me the map, and I'll follow it." The papers on the table shifted slightly in the draft, rustling like her answer. I closed the folder, slid it back into the box, and straightened my spine. The truth wasn't gone, it was waiting, and so was I. Sometimes strength isn't in raising your voice. It's in letting others believe you've got none left, until the right moment to strike. Harold's kitchen was dim, lit only by the yellow glow of the overworked lamp above the table. The smell of burnt coffee hung in the air. He poured 2 mugs, sliding one across to me. "Black, no sugar, same as always," he muttered. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat settle into my bones. My voice was rough when I finally spoke. "The deed's gone. Safe deposit box emptied. Bank says Daniel used power of attorney." Harold grunted, shaking his head. "Son of a bitch. I never gave him that authority, not once." "Doesn't matter what you did or didn't," Harold said, leaning back in his chair. "They filed it. They think they've got you cornered." I stared into the coffee, the black surface trembling with the shake of my hand. "Cornered is right. Claire and Daniel have me eating turkey in the garage. Now Vanessa's cutting me out of family photos. And Daniel," my voice cracked. "Daniel just stands there." Harold's eyes softened for a moment. "He's weak, she's the driver, don't confuse the two." "Doesn't change the result," I whispered. "They're stripping me piece by piece. First the chair at the table, then the deed, then—" I stopped, throat tightening. "I don't know what's left." Harold leaned forward, planting his hands on the table. "Listen, Sam, they think you're old, weak, washed up. Let them. Use it. There's power in being underestimated. You and I learned that a long time ago." I looked up. His eyes hadn't changed since Korea, steel wrapped in weathered flesh. "Remember Hill 314, he pressed. "We let 'em think we were retreating, then circled around and lit their ammo dump sky high. That wasn't muscle, that was patience, calculation. Same game now, just quieter." His words settled into me, heavy but steady. I sipped the bitter coffee, the warmth cutting through my chest. Ellen's voice stirred in my head again, faint but certain. "Don't let anyone erase you, Sam. Not even family, especially not family." She'd always been the planner, the protector. She prepared for storms I refused to believe would come. I set the mug down, the ceramic clink echoing in the quiet. "Ellen planned for this," I murmured. Harold raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I stood slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. "She kept copies, always did. She didn't trust banks. Said paper was safer when it was in your own damn hands." Harold smirked. "Smart woman, smarter than either of us." I left him at the table and went to the spare room he'd set aside for me. Boxes lined the walls, relics of my old life I'd stored here when space ran thin. My fingers traced the labels, Ellen's handwriting neat as a schoolteacher's. One read, "How/will COPIES." My chest tightened. I pulled it down, setting it on the bed. The cardboard groaned as I peeled it open. Inside were manila folders, each tab marked in black ink. Deed photocopy. Will signed, trust notes. My hands shook as I opened the first folder. There it was. The house deed, our names printed clear, notarized, stamped. A duplicate Ellen had made years ago. The next folder held the will, signatures crisp, the ink preserved. A sticky note fluttered loose. Ellen's handwriting again. "Never sign alone, keep your copy safe." I pressed the note to my chest. Inner thought. She knew. She saw the betrayal before I did. She left me breadcrumbs, lifelines in manila folders. Proof that what Daniel and Vanessa thought they'd erased still existed. Proof that I wasn't powerless. I stacked the folders carefully, the weight of them steady in my lap. For the first time in weeks, my breathing eased. From the kitchen, Harold called out, "Find what you were looking for." I looked down at Ellen's handwriting one more time, the ink anchoring me. "No," I said softly, almost to myself. "I found what she left me." The lamp buzzed overhead, casting my shadow long across the wall, a shadow no one could erase. It's one thing to be erased from the table. It's another to watch someone spend your life's work while smiling in your face. The living room buzzed with holiday chatter, the smell of cinnamon and pine covering the air like a blanket. Vanessa stood by the tree, a stack of red envelopes in her manicured hands, handing them out like royalty distributing favors. Here you go, Aunt Marcy, for helping with the decorations. And this one's for you, Uncle Pete. A little something toward the flight costs. Each envelope carried her name in looping script, from Vanessa, written bold across the front. Relatives cooed, voices dripping with gratitude. Vanessa, you didn't have to. So generous of you. You really think of everyone. I stood in the corner, paper cup of cider warming my hand. My jaw tightened with each thank you that floated across the room. Aunt Marcy brushed past me, clutching her envelope. She leaned in, whispering, "You raised a smart son, but that wife of his, she's really something. Covering expenses for everyone, that's generosity." My throat burned. I forced a stiff smile, nodding. Vanessa's eyes met mine across the room, her lips curling. Not a smile, a smirk, the kind that said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." I shifted my weight, fists clenching in my pockets. When the relatives tore the envelopes open, the glint of checks caught my eye. Checks with my bank's logo in the corner, my name printed at the top. I nearly choked. My money. Every single check was written from my account, the signature line bearing my forged scrawl. Vanessa had signed my name like it was nothing, claimed the gesture as hers, and stood basking in the praise. Daniel clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "Let's thank Vanessa for thinking of everyone this year." The family applauded her. My ears rang, my chest tightened. I wanted to shout, to rip the checks back, to scream that it was my savings, my work, my sweat poured into every dollar. But instead I stayed in the corner, silent, watching. Ben tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa, did you get an envelope too?" I forced a small laugh. "Not this time, buddy." He frowned. "But Mom said you don't need one. You already have everything." The words struck like a hammer. I excused myself, slipping into the hallway. The laughter behind me roared on, muffled as I closed the study door. My hands shook as I braced against Ellen's old desk. Inner monologue. She's not just cruel. This isn't about embarrassment anymore. She's rewriting the story with my money, my name, my legacy, turning me into the nobody in the corner while she plays the benefactor. I yanked open the desk drawer. Ellen's folders stared back, her neat labels steady against my trembling fingers. Trust notes, banking records, copies. Flipping one open, I found statements, photocopied years ago. Ellen had circled balances in red ink, annotated transfers, scrawled notes about savings she wanted protected. She must have known something like this could happen, must have felt it in her bones. I whispered into the silence, "You left me the map, Ellen. You knew they'd come for it." The door creaked open. Harold's voice carried low, "You all right?" I didn't turn. She's giving away my money, signing my name, and everyone claps. He stepped closer, the floor creaking under his boots. "So let them clap. Every cheer digs her hole deeper. They'll remember who handed the envelopes, not who paid for them. That's her mistake." I closed the folder slowly, pressing my hand against it. "She's rewriting history, Harold." "Then you make sure the ending's yours," he said simply. I straightened, tucking Ellen's folders back in place. My reflection in the study's dark window looked older than I felt, but there was steel in the eyes staring back at me. I whispered under my breath, words meant for Ellen, meant for myself. She can sign my name, but she'll never own it. That's the part she forgot. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses swelled from the other room, but it no longer rang like victory. It sounded like noise before the storm. The cruel don't whisper, they brag, forgetting that pride always leaves an echo. Sometimes that echo becomes a weapon. The restaurant buzzed with holiday chatter, silverware clinking. Carols floating soft in the background. Vanessa had chosen a trendy brunch spot, all marble tables and overpriced mimosas. She loved scenes like this, an audience, however small, to watch her performance. I sat at the far end of the table, Harold beside me. He leaned in while Vanessa ordered another round of champagne. "Got something for you," he whispered, slipping a small object into my coat pocket. I glanced down. What's this? Recorder, voice activated. Old habits die hard, he muttered, eyes scanning the room like he was back on patrol. I gave him a look. You really think she'll slip up? Harold smirked. Pride makes people stupid. She won't be able to help herself. Vanessa's sister, Diane, arrived late, her fur coat still dusted with snow. She kissed Vanessa on both cheeks before sliding into the chair across from her. Tell me everything, Diane said, her voice dripping with curiosity. Vanessa leaned in close, lowering her voice just enough to make others lean toward her. It's done. The house is ours now. Finally secured it. My stomach dropped. Diane's eyes widened. Already, but the old man still there, isn't he? Vanessa smirked, swirling her champagne. Technically, but he's out of the way. We've got him in the garage for now. By spring, he'll be in a condo somewhere. Smaller, easier, out of sight. Diane laughed softly, covering her mouth. Savage. Necessary, Vanessa corrected, her tone sharp. You don't build a future by letting the past take up space. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside her but said nothing. He never said anything. He just stared into his plate like it held the answers he was too afraid to give. I forced myself to stay still, my jaw locked tight. My fingers itched to grab the recorder, slam it on the table, and shove their words back at them. But Harold's voice echoed in my head. Use it. Don't waste it. So I stayed silent, let them brag, let them bury themselves. The meal went on, laughter rising around me, but Vanessa's words dug deeper than any knife. The house is ours now. He'll be out by spring. When the check came, she slid Daniel's card across like she owned him too. Don't worry, she said with a wink to Diane. It's all covered. I caught Harold's eye. He gave a slow nod as if to say, we got it. That night back at Harold's, I sat at the kitchen table with the recorder in my hand. My thumb hovered over the play button. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to hear it again, didn't want to confirm the venom in her voice. But I pressed it anyway. The device crackled to life. Vanessa's voice filled the room. It's done. The house is ours now. We've got him in the garage. By spring, he'll be in a condo out of sight. Hearing it replayed, detached from her smug smile, made it even colder. Evidence now, not just a memory to be dismissed. Harold leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Well, that enough for you? I nodded slowly. My hands tightened around the recorder. It's enough to hang her with. Inner monologue. All these months I thought it was just cruelty, petty humiliation. But no, she had a plan, step by step. First the chair at the table, then the garage, then the deed. All with Daniel's silence as her permission slip. But Ellen's words came back again, steady in my mind. Don't let them erase you, Sam. Don't let them sign you away. She had left me the papers. Harold had given me the recorder. Piece by piece I was building a shield, and maybe a sword. I set the recorder down carefully on Ellen's folder, her handwriting staring back at me. They think they've already won, I whispered, but they just gave me their confession gift wrapped in tinsel. The bulb above flickered, and the tape hissed one more time before going silent. When the ground beneath you feels stolen, sometimes salvation comes not in thunder, but in the calm voice of someone who remembers your truth. The office hadn't changed much since Ellen and I last sat here years ago. Same oak shelves stacked with leather-bound law books, same framed diplomas lining the wall, same faint smell of ink and dust. Only Helen looked different, a little more silver in her hair, a little more tired around the eyes. But when she saw me step through the doorway, her face lit up. Sam, she said warmly, standing from her desk, it's been a long time. I gripped her hand, my throat tight. Too long. Ellen always trusted you. She nodded, her eyes softening. And I trusted her. Sit, tell me everything. I laid the eviction notice on her desk, then the forged documents Daniel and Vanessa had shoved at me, then the photocopies Ellen had preserved. My hands shook as I spread them out like a broken deck of cards. Helen slipped on her glasses, scanning each page carefully. The room was silent except for the faint scratch of her pen making notes in the margins. After a few long minutes, she looked up, her jaw tight. "Sam, this isn't just sloppy paperwork. This is fraud." I swallowed hard. "Fraud." She tapped one document with her pen. "See this notary stamp? The man listed here died 5 years ago. I attended his funeral." The words hit like a hammer. My stomach twisted, bile rising. So, they didn't even try to hide it. Helen leaned back in her chair, sighing. People who think they're untouchable rarely do. Vanessa strikes me as the type who assumes no one will question her. Daniel, he's along for the ride. I ran my hands through my hair. They've already taken the deed from the safe deposit box. Bank said Daniel used power of attorney. Helen's eyes sharpened. "Did you ever sign a POA?" "No," my voice cracked. "Never." "Then it's forged too," she said flatly, "which makes their entire foundation rotten. But Sam," she leaned forward, voice steady but firm, "we don't move yet. We let her dig deeper. The more rope she takes, the tighter the noose." I frowned. "You're telling me to wait after everything?" "I'm telling you to be patient," she said, her tone softening. "If we act too soon, they'll spin it. Say it was confusion or a misunderstanding. If we wait, if we collect enough, there won't be a hole big enough for her to crawl out of." Harold shifted in his chair beside me, grumbling. "So what, we sit back and let her prance around spending his money, calling herself the saint of the family?" Helen shot him a knowing look. "We sit back and let her hang herself with her own arrogance. Trust me, Harold, I've seen it before." I let out a shaky breath. For the first time in months, the weight on my chest felt lighter. Someone believed me. Someone saw the fraud for what it was. I looked down at Ellen's handwriting on the photocopies. Her neat lines of ink steadied me. She left the map. Helen was showing me how to follow it. Helen folded the forged documents neatly, sliding them into a separate folder. "I'll hold on to these. Keep your copies safe. And Sam," she looked me dead in the eye, "you're not alone in this anymore." My throat tightened. I nodded, gripping the edge of the desk. Inner monologue. For weeks I'd been treated like clutter, like excess space to be pushed into the garage, erased from photos, robbed from my own house. But here in this office I wasn't invisible. I wasn't crazy. I was a man wronged with proof, with allies, with a plan forming in the shadows. As we stood to leave, Helen's hand rested briefly on my shoulder. "Patience, Sam. Let her dig. And when the ground gives way beneath her, we'll be waiting." The afternoon sun poured through the blinds, slicing the office into light and shadow. For the first time in months, I felt steady enough to stand in both. Sometimes the sharpest truths don't come from schemers or lawyers. They slip from the mouth of a child, unguarded, honest, and cruel without knowing it. The afternoon was quiet, snow falling soft outside Harold's window. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, when little footsteps pattered across the floor. Ben's voice piped up. "Grandpa, I made you something." He held out a sheet of paper, colors crayon bright and messy. I smiled, taking it carefully. "What have we got here?" "It's our house," he said proudly, pointing. "See, that's Mom and Dad in the living room, that's me upstairs." My chest warmed as I traced the shapes, until my eyes caught the corner of the drawing. A small square, the garage. And there I was, drawn with shaky lines, standing outside it, alone. I forced my voice steady. "And who's that out there?" Ben giggled. "That's you, Grandpa, in the garage." The room tilted for a moment. My fingers tightened on the paper. "The garage." He nodded earnestly. "Mom says you'll be gone soon. She said you don't fit anymore." The words hit harder than any bullet I'd ever dodged. I swallowed hard, crouching so I was eye level with him. "Ben, did she really say that?" He shrugged, innocent. "She says the house is gonna be different. She says the garage is where you go for now, but then you'll be gone, like poof." He made a little gesture with his finge. When he ran back to play, I sat there staring at the paper. My figure outside the garage looked small, almost an afterthought. Ellen's voice rose in my memory. "Don't let anyone erase you, Sam. Not even family, especially not family." I clenched the drawing in my hands, my heart hammering. Vanessa wasn't just rewriting checks or stealing deeds. She was rewriting memory itself, conditioning my grandson to believe I belonged outside, removed, erased. I could feel Ellen's photo calling to me from the bedroom. That night I sat on the edge of Harold's spare bed, the photo of Ellen in my hands. Her eyes were steady, kind, the same way they looked at me on the day we bought the house. I whispered to her through the stillness. "They're turning Ben against me, making him believe I'm already gone. You'd hate this, Ellen. You'd hate what she's doing to him." The photo didn't answer, but her memory did, the way she always prepared, the copies she made, the sticky notes in her neat handwriting. She knew this could happen. She armed me. My voice dropped to a promise. "I won't let her erase me, not from the house, not from the will, and sure as hell not from Ben's memory." The next morning, Harold found me at the table, the drawing spread out between the folders Ellen left. He squinted at it. "That's brutal," he muttered. "He doesn't even know what he revealed," I said quietly. "Vanessa's feeding him the story, making me the outsider." Harold poured himself coffee, shaking his head. "Then you fight back the only way you can. Not fists, not shouting. Proof. Exposure. You show the truth until even a kid can't be told otherwise." I nodded slowly. That's what Ellen would want. Inner monologue. Every betrayal has layers. First the garage, then the photo, then the deed, then the checks. Now my grandson's innocence used as a weapon. But Vanessa doesn't realize with every layer she adds, the case against her grows heavier. I tucked the drawing into Ellen's folder, sliding it between the deed copies and the will. A child's crayon lines might not mean much in court, but to me, it was evidence, proof of her manipulation. I pressed Ellen's photo to my chest one last time before setting it on the nightstand. "They want me out, Ellen, but I swear to you I'll outlast them." The snow outside kept falling, white and relentless, as if the world itself was erasing footprints. But not mine, not yet. The walls of a house hold secrets, but sooner or later someone official comes knocking, asking questions that lies can't answer. The day was gray, snow melting into dirty slush along the sidewalks. Harold parked his truck across the street from my house, the house Ellen and I built our lives in. From behind the windshield, I could see the wreath Vanessa had hung on the door, a symbol of ownership that wasn't hers, not truly. "Right on time," Harold muttered, nodding toward a white city vehicle pulling up. Out stepped a man in a heavy coat, clipboard under his arm, a city inspector. Helen had arranged it, citing anonymous complaints about unpermitted remodeling. I adjusted the camera in my lap, my hands steady for once. Today I wasn't just watching, I was recording. The inspector knocked. Vanessa answered, her smile stretched tight. "Good morning, can I help you?" "Ma'am, I'm here to review recent renovations on the property," he said flatly, holding up his badge. Her smile faltered. "Renovations, I think you've got the wrong address." The inspector flipped his clipboard. "Records show this address. New walls, plumbing adjustments, even a shed addition. None of it has permits. I'll need to take a look." From the truck, I saw her stiffen. Daniel appeared behind her, hair must tie askew. He whispered something, but she waved him off. "Of course, come in," she said finally, her voice brittle. Through the front window, I watched them lead the inspector through the house. He pointed at the kitchen walls, at the new counters Vanessa had bragged about to relatives. His brow furrowed. He jotted notes. When they reached the study, the argument spilled loud enough for me to hear through the cracked truck window. "This isn't in your name," the inspector said sharply. County registry still shows Samuel Anderson as co-owner, yet the trust lists Vanessa Anderson. Which is it? I snapped a photo of the moment, zooming in on their faces, Daniel frozen, Vanessa flushed red. Must be an error, she stammered. Paperwork just hasn't updated yet. The inspector crossed his arms. That error carries fines, and if it's deliberate misrepresentation, bigger problems. Daniel rubbed his temples. Vanessa, I told you we should have waited. She spun on him. Don't you dare blame me for this. You're supposed to handle the filings. Me? You're the one pushing this faster than. Enough, the inspector snapped. I'll be back for follow-up. In the meantime, no further work is to be done until permits are approved. Understood. Their silence was answer enough. He stormed out, brushing past Vanessa's tight smile turned to stone. I lifted the camera again, catching the moment she slammed the door behind him. Harold let out a low whistle. She's cracking. She's exposed, I corrected, tucking the camera back into its case. Every time she opens her mouth, she digs deeper. We watched through the glass as Vanessa whirled on Daniel, her arms slicing the air. I couldn't hear the words now, but I didn't need to. His slumped shoulders said it all. For years I'd mistaken his silence for loyalty. Now I saw it for what it was: fear, weakness. Inner monologue. Ellen and I built that house nail by nail. We laid the floorboards, painted the walls, planted the trees out back. And now my son stood silent while his wife dismantled it, not just physically, but legally, morally, historically. But today the inspector had reminded them I wasn't gone yet. On paper, I still stood inside those walls. And paper doesn't lie. The inspector's car pulled away. Vanessa yanked the curtains shut, as if that could hide her panic from the world. I sat back in Harold's truck, the camera warm in my hands. We've got her, I whispered. Not enough to finish it yet, but enough to start. Harold started the engine, nodding. Patience, Sam. Let her dig. We'll be here when the ground gives out. Snow began to fall again, light flakes settling on the windshield. I thought of Ellen's handwriting, her steady lines on every document she saved. Vanessa thought she could erase me from the house, but the law still had my name carved into its bones, and I intended to keep it there. Revenge doesn't always arrive with fire or fury. Sometimes it's tucked inside an envelope, served with eggs and champagne. The restaurant smelled of butter and maple syrup, the clatter of cutlery bouncing off high ceilings. It was New Year's Day, the place buzzing with families and friends raising toasts to clean slates. Harold and I slipped into a corner booth, our eyes trained on the opposite side of the room. There they were, Vanessa and Daniel, holding court at a large table. She wore a red blazer sharp enough to cut, laughing too loudly, her hand resting possessively on Daniel's arm. Around them, their friends leaned in, hanging on her stories. I stirred my coffee slowly, the bitterness coating my tongue. Helen said noon, I asked. Harold glanced at his watch. Any minute. Right on cue, a young server approached their table, silver tray balanced against his hip. He set down plates, then reached into his apron and pulled out 2 thick envelopes. Delivery for Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, he said brightly, placing the subpoenas neatly beside their mimosas. The sound of chatter dimmed around them, curiosity prickling in the air. Vanessa frowned, sliding one envelope closer. She tore it open, her manicured fingers trembling as she scanned the first page. Her face drained of color. Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. What is it? He asked, reaching for his copy. She hissed, it's a subpoena. The table went silent. Their friends exchanged wary glances. From across the room, I saw Daniel stammer, his lips moving without sound. Finally, he found his voice. There's been some mistake. This is just paperwork, nothing serious. Vanessa's eyes flashed panic before she plastered on a brittle smile. Yes, nothing to worry about. But the whispers had already begun. I slid out of the booth, Harold watching me carefully. My legs carried me steady across the room, my coat brushing past chairs. As I reached their table, I leaned close, just enough for them to hear. "Merry Christmas," I whispered. Daniel's head jerked up. His face was pale, sweat already beading his forehead. Vanessa's lips tightened into a thin line, her nails digging crescents into the envelope she clutched. Their friends stared between us, confusion and suspicion growing with every second. I didn't linger. I straightened, gave the table a polite nod, and kept walking. Behind me the murmurs spread. "What was that about? Did you see his face? Subpoena." Back at our booth, Harold chuckled low. "Hell of a delivery." I sat down, my coffee cold but satisfying. It's the first time in months I've felt the ground shift. Inner monologue. For weeks they had played puppeteers, pulling strings with forged signatures and smug smiles. I'd been the man in the garage, the one left out of photos, erased from my own story. But now, their names weren't just whispered over champagne anymore. They were inked in legal filings, dragged into the light of court, and I had been the one to hand them the spotlight. Across the room, Vanessa tried to recover, laughing too loudly at some half-hearted joke. Daniel's hands shook as he refilled his glass, spilling champagne onto the tablecloth. Their friends looked less like admirers now, more like jurors. I took out my phone, snapped one quiet photo, Vanessa with her head bent over the subpoena, Daniel fumbling beside her. Proof, not for the court but for myself. The picture of power beginning to crumble. Harold raised his mug. "To Helen," he said. I lifted mine, clinking it against his. "To Ellen," I corrected softly. Because in that moment, I felt her beside me, her handwriting on the copies, her foresight the rope I now pulled tight around Vanessa's arrogance. The brunch carried on, laughter from other tables filling the air. But for Vanessa and Daniel, the celebration was over. I sipped my coffee, watching them squirm in their own theater. For the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt inevitable. The truth doesn't need fireworks to spread, just paper, ink, and the right set of eyes. Lies crumble when the community starts whispering. Helen tapped the folder on her desk, sliding a single sheet toward me. My statement. Simple, direct, notarized. She had helped me word it carefully, no accusations without proof, just facts laid bare. I read the first lines again. "My name is Samuel Anderson. I am the co-owner of the Anderson home. Without my knowledge, forged signatures and fraudulent filings were used to strip me of my rights." Helen's pen tapped against the wood. "It's ready. The church group's newsletter is going to run it. Once it's out, you can't take it back." I took a deep breath. I don't want it back, I want it seen. The following Sunday, the newsletter circulated like wildfire. Folded in hymnals, tucked into pews, posted on the corkboard near the parish hall. By noon, half the town had read it. I walked past the churchyard, Harold beside me, listening as murmurs floated in the cold air. "Did you see? Forged signatures." "Vanessa, I always thought she was pushy, but this." And Daniel just went along with it. Each whisper was a stone dropped in a pond, ripples widening. By Monday morning, neighbors at the cafe were passing copies across tables. The women in the quilting circle clucked their tongues. Even the men at the hardware store shook their heads, muttering about how Daniel never was his own man. I stayed quiet, letting their words move through the town like smoke. Vanessa, however, did not. At the next church meeting, she arrived overdressed, her red heels clicking against the tile like gunfire. Daniel trailed behind, face pale and tight. She plastered on a smile, shaking hands too firmly. "Oh, I just wanted to clear up some silly confusion," she announced loudly to anyone within earshot. "It's all just an estate misunderstanding. Paperwork's tricky, you know. My father-in-law simply doesn't understand how things were filed. It's nothing sinister." The group around her nodded politely, but their eyes didn't match their smiles. I watched from the back, my arms folded. One woman leaned closer to her friend, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. Funny how misunderstandings usually don't involve dead notaries. Her friend smirked, or eviction notices to your own father. Vanessa's smile faltered. Later that night, Harold tossed the newsletter onto the table at his kitchen. "She's flailing," he said with a grin, "like a cat in a sack." I picked it up, reading my own words in print. They didn't look like much, just black ink on white paper, but the effect was louder than any argument I could have shouted across a dinner table. Inner monologue. For months she'd controlled the narrative. She handed out checks with my money, claimed generosity. She posed in front of my house, pretended it was hers. She even fed my grandson stories where I didn't exist. But now people weren't clapping. They were questioning. And once a question is asked, it never really goes away. The phone rang. Helen's voice came through, calm but firm. "It's working. The letter has weight because it's notarized. No one can call it gossip. It's your words against their forgery, and your words ring true." I sat in silence for a long moment. Ellen would have loved this. I said finally, "She always believed paper had power." Helen chuckled softly. "Your wife was right. Paper outlasts pride every time." That night I set the newsletter beside Ellen's photo. Her smile in the frame seemed steadier under the lamp's glow, as if approving. I whispered to her, "They thought they could erase me, but now the whole town sees the erasure, and they see through it." The house outside wasn't mine yet, but the story, that was shifting. Closing beat. Vanessa's lies had been polished for years, but lies don't echo the way truth does. And now, her voice was just one against a chorus of whispers she couldn't silence. The newsletter rustled as I folded it shut, the sound like a gavel striking wood. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come with a knife in the back, it comes with silence. And silence cuts just as deep. It was past midnight when Harold's old hound started barking. Headlights sliced across the frosted curtains. I rose from the couch, my bones stiff, and peered through the window. Daniel's car. Harold shifted in his chair, muttering, "Told you the cracks would come." I opened the door before he could knock. Daniel stood on the porch, his coat half-buttoned, his eyes bloodshot. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a boy caught sneaking in after curfew. "Dad," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I stepped aside, but my voice stayed cold. "Inside, quick." He sat at Harold's table, his hands twisting together like he was wringing water from them. I stayed standing. "You've made it clear enough where you stand," I said. His eyes flicked up, shame written across them. "It wasn't me, it was Vanessa. She pushed all of it, the documents, the notary, the garage." I slammed my palm on the table, the sound echoing. "Don't you dare put this all on her." He flinched. "But it's true. She said we needed it, that you didn't matter anymore. She said the house was wasted on." He stopped short, swallowing the rest. "On me," I snapped. He nodded weakly. "She told me it was about protecting our future, for Ben, for the family." I leaned in, my voice sharp as broken glass. "Protecting the family doesn't mean robbing it, and don't you dare hide behind your son's name. You were silent, Daniel. Every time she humiliated me, every time she cut me out, every forged paper she slid across the table, you sat there silent. Silence is guilt." His shoulders collapsed. His lips trembled, but no words came. For the first time, I saw not arrogance in his face, but a boy caught in his own cowardice. Harold cleared his throat, speaking low. "He's telling you she drove the bus. That much is clear. But he climbed on board, didn't he?" Daniel rubbed his temples. "I didn't know it would go this far. I thought it was just restructuring." "Restructuring," I spat. "That's what you call throwing your father into the garage. Taking my money, signing my name, erasing me from my own grandson's memory." Daniel's voice cracked. "I swear I didn't want that." "But you let it happen," I said, steady as a hammer. You watched me disappear one chair at a time, and you chose quiet. That's the same as choosing her." He buried his face in his hands. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint tick of Harold's clock. Finally, he whispered, "What do I do?" I stared at him, my heart a war between fury and grief. "You fix it. You speak up. You tell the truth before she drags you under. Because make no mistake, Daniel, when she sinks, she'll take you with her." He looked up, his eyes wet. "And if I can't?" "Then you drown beside her." Inner monologue. I wanted to reach for him, the boy who once held my hand crossing streets, who once cried into my chest when Ellen passed. But that boy was gone. In his place sat a man who traded backbone for silence, conviction for convenience. And yet beneath the wreckage I saw something flicker, maybe guilt, maybe shame, maybe a chance. Daniel stood slowly, pulling his coat tight. He nodded once, not in defiance, but surrender. "I'll try." I didn't move toward him, didn't hug him, didn't forgive. "Trying won't save you," I said. "Only truth will, and truth has teeth." He lowered his head, stepping into the cold night without another word. Harold watched him leave, shaking his head. "You think he'll come around?" I stared at the closed door. "If he doesn't, he'll learn what it feels like to be erased, just like he let her do to me." The silence after he left wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, sharp, a silence that demanded justice. And I intended to deliver it. Christmas doesn't always bring gifts under the tree. Sometimes it brings justice, wrapped in paper and sealed with a gavel. The courtroom smelled of old wood and disinfectant, the kind of place where truth had weight and lies came undone. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Helen and Harold at my side. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from years of silence finally breaking. Vanessa swept in wearing a navy suit, heels clicking like gunfire. Her face was painted calm, but her eyes darted like a cornered animal. Daniel trailed behind, his tie loose, his shoulders slumped. He wouldn't look at me. The judge entered, robe swishing, voice commanding the room. "Anderson v. Anderson Trust. Let's proceed." Helen rose first, steady as a blade. "Your Honor, today we present not just documents but a pattern of forgery, of fraud, of deliberate erasure of my client's rights." She laid out the exhibits one by one. Photocopies Ellen had preserved, the forged deed with my signature in handwriting that wasn't mine, the notary stamp from a man buried 5 years ago. Then came the recorder. Helen pressed play and Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom. "The house is ours now. He'll be in a condo by spring." Gasps rippled through the benches. Vanessa's cheeks flushed red. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Anderson, is that your voice?" Vanessa shifted in her seat, forcing a smile. "Yes, but taken out of context. It was a private joke." Helen pounced. "A joke? Discussing removing your father-in-law from his own home, joking about hiding him in a garage until you could dispose of him." "I never meant—" "You meant every word," Helen cut in, her tone razor-sharp. Daniel's lawyer tried to intervene, mumbling about misunderstandings and confusion over a state law. But when the judge asked Daniel directly if he had verified the documents, he kept his eyes on the table, lips pressed shut. The silence in that room was deafening. Finally, the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Anderson, your father's signature was forged. A notary who died in 2018 somehow authenticated it. What do you have to say?" Daniel's voice cracked. I didn't stop it." Vanessa whipped her head toward him, fury in her eyes. "Don't you dare." "Silence," the judge barked. Helen's closing words cut through the tension like a hymn. "This isn't about confusion, Your Honor. This is about a man robbed of his dignity by family who should have been his protectors. The law doesn't reward arrogance or fraud. The law restores what was stolen." The judge shuffled the papers, face hardening. "This court rules the trust fraudulent, the eviction void. Title and ownership are reinstated to Samuel Anderson. Furthermore, given Mrs. Anderson's involvement in financial fraud, her license is suspended pending investigation. The gavel cracked down. For a moment, the world stopped. Vanessa gasped, her carefully composed face shattering. Suspended, you can't. The bailiff moved closer, warning in his stance. Daniel sank further into his chair, head in his hands. He looked smaller than ever. Harold leaned close, whispering in my ear, "Merry damn Christmas." I let out a shaky breath, my eyes closing for just a moment. Not relief, not yet, but the first taste of justice. Inner monologue. For months I'd been shoved into corners, the garage, the back row, the silence of exile. But here, in front of strangers sworn to impartiality, my truth had weight. My wife's foresight, Harold's loyalty, Helen's precision, together they had turned the tide. Vanessa thought she could build a house on lies, but lies rot, and today the rot gave way. When we left the courthouse, reporters circled, microphones flashing. Vanessa shoved past them, face twisted, barking no comment. Daniel trailed behind, silent, his shame loud enough to speak for him. I paused at the steps, the winter air biting, snow falling like ash. I looked up, whispering to Ellen, "We won." The cold no longer stung. The gavel's echo still rang in my ears, steady and final. Reputation is glass. Once cracked, it doesn't take a hammer to shatter, just whispers, passed from one mouth to another, until nothing's left but shards. It didn't take long. Within a week of the court ruling, Vanessa's name spread across town like smoke. Clients pulled their accounts from her office, muttering about trust issues. The firm where she worked issued a statement. Pending investigation, Vanessa Anderson has been placed on indefinite leave. At the diner, I overheard two men at the counter. Fraud, can you believe it? A notary dead 5 years. Always knew she was too slick for her own good. Their laughter wasn't cruel, just certain. Harold dropped by with the latest newspaper, tossing it onto the kitchen table. Local financial, ADVISOR, under investigation. Her photo stared back, drained of its usual confidence. The article was factual, but the town didn't need headlines to judge. They'd seen enough at brunch, at church, in whispered conversations over fences. "She's finished," Harold muttered, pouring himself coffee. I nodded slowly, not because of me, because of her own choices. Even her family pulled away. Vanessa's sister Diane, once her closest ally, was overheard in the grocery store. We had no idea she was capable of this. It's embarrassing. Her parents canceled a vacation house gathering, quietly telling friends it was better to lay low. The empire she'd built, the dinners, the brunches, the photo-perfect reputation, crumbled in days. Daniel, though, tried to salvage something from the ruins. He came by one evening, standing awkwardly on Harold's porch. "Dad, can we talk?" I crossed my arms. What could you possibly have to say? "She's gone," he said, voice low. "The clients, the house, the everything, she's not herself anymore." I laughed bitterly. "She was always herself, Daniel. You just never looked close enough." He winced. "I made mistakes. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I thought keeping peace was better than picking sides." "And what did that cost?" I asked. He dropped his head. "You." For a moment, the silence between us felt heavier than the snow falling outside. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered. I want to fix things for Ben." The name of my grandson stirred something in me. Not forgiveness, but a reminder of why I'd fought in the first place. I shook my head. "It's not me you need to convince. It's him. He needs to see the truth before he grows up thinking silence is strength." Daniel's eyes glistened. He nodded once, then turned back toward his car, his shoulders bent beneath the weight of his choices. Inner monologue. Vanessa had been the storm, fierce and relentless. But Daniel was the silence that let the storm flood the house. Both had left me standing in the wreckage. And while one was broken by exposure, The other still had a chance if he chose it. In town, Vanessa became a ghost. Her red heels no longer clicked on the church floor. She avoided the market, sent others for errands. Those who saw her said she walked fast, sunglasses on, as though hiding from the air itself. The whispers followed her everywhere. She forged her father-in-law's name. Didn't even leave him a seat at the table. Who does that to family? And when she passed, heads shook, voices dropped, and doors closed. At night, I sat by Ellen's photo, reading the newsletter again, rereading the court order that reinstated my name on the deed. They see her now, Ellen, I whispered, not me, her. The victory wasn't sweet, too much had been lost for that, but it was steady, a correction written not by my voice but by hers unraveling. Closing beat. Vanessa thought she could erase me, but in the end, it was her name that vanished from her firm, from her family's respect, from the community she'd once controlled. Reputation is fragile, and hers was dust. The sweetest revenge isn't thunder or applause, it's sitting where you belong, with no one left to argue otherwise. The house smelled like rosemary and ham again. My house. Ellen's curtains swayed lightly in the spring breeze, the windows open for the first time in years. Easter lilies sat in a vase on the table, the same table where I'd once been told there was no room for me. Now every chair was filled. Harold sat to my left, his old laugh shaking the walls as he teased Helen about her fancy lawyer words. Helen raised her glass, steady and proud, her presence a reminder that justice didn't always come with noise but with persistence. At the far end, Ben bounced in his seat, crayons scattered beside his plate. He'd drawn another picture, this one showed us all inside the house together. No one left in the garage. Halfway through dinner, Ben tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa, Dad," he said with a grin, the words tumbling out without hesitation. The room went still for a second, then warm laughter broke out. He didn't realize what he'd done, but I did. Vanessa wasn't here to correct him, to snap or sneer or cut me down. Her shadow no longer touched this table. "Grandpa, Dad, can you pass the rolls?" I swallowed past the lump in my throat, handing them over with a smile. "Of course, son." Helen raised her glass again. "To family," she said simply. "The ones who stay, the ones who fight for each other, the ones who endure." The glasses clinked, the sound softer than a gavel but no less final. Inner monologue. For so long I'd lived in exile inside my own home. A ghost at birthdays, an afterthought at dinners, banished to the garage on Christmas. They thought they could erase me with forged papers and silence. But I had something stronger than their lies, Ellen's foresight, Harold's loyalty, Helen's tenacity, and a truth that couldn't be buried, no matter how hard they tried. Now, looking around this table, I realized the fight hadn't been about brick and mortar. It had been about memory, about my grandson knowing where he came from and who had built the walls around him. Daniel sat quietly at the far end. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't hiding anymore either. Our eyes met across the table. He raised his glass in a small, hesitant gesture. I nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Ben broke the silence by announcing proudly, "I told my teacher my grandpa is my hero." The table chuckled, but my chest tightened, full and aching. After dessert, when the plates were cleared and the candles flickered low, I leaned back in my chair. The head of the table, my chair. It no longer felt like a battlefield, no longer a symbol of what had been stolen. It felt earned, restored, as if Ellen herself had placed it beneath me again. Harold nudged me with his elbow. "Looks good on you, Sam, like it never left." I smiled faintly. That's because it never did. Closing beat. Peace doesn't come from courtrooms or subpoenas alone. It comes from reclaiming the seat they tried to strip away and finding it still fits. The head of the table, my house, my family. And the silence around me. For the first time, it wasn't exile. It was peace.